Hey everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another episode of the mel0n Review. Today we're going to be unboxing and doing some first impressions of the EPOMAKER TH80 SE. Now, thank you very much to EPOMAKER who was kind enough to send us out for a review. I greatly appreciate it. Now, I've only covered a couple keyboards here on the channel before. I've covered the Leobog keyboard, which actually ironically enough was a collaboration between Leobog and EPOMAKER. And then I'm also covering the Lightning 60HE keyboard as well, but that is a rapid trigger board, which is great for gaming, but I don't really have a keyboard that fulfills that just general use typing editing keyboard. I was using the Leobog keyboard for a little while, but that keyboard was just too aggressively tilted for me to type on comfortably. So I've been in the market for a new just general work editing typing keyboard, and I'm hoping I can use the TH80 SE as a new work and editing board, just because this board does have a lot of features that lean it toward that work editing use case. As well, also EPOMAKER apparently has some really good quality boards, and there's also a lot of uniqueness to the switches and a lot of really cool features on this board. So I'm very excited to tell you guys all about them in today's unboxing video. Now, as always, this is going to be a quick unboxing and first impressions. I will have a much more in-depth review of this board coming out in a couple weeks once I have time to do some more testing and put some hours on it. So be sure to get subscribed if you want to see my more in-depth thoughts on this board coming out in a couple weeks. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Let's first talk about the pricing, the features on this board, and then we'll get right into the unboxing. All right, now in terms of pricing and tech specs, this board retails for $99.99 USD. This is a 75% layout board. Now, this does come in two colorways. There is a black silver and a black purple. Now, keep in mind the keycap design is going to vary a little bit depending on the colorway you choose. So for the black purple, the keycaps are going to be more of a cherry profile, which is the one I have here today. And for the black silver, they're going to be more of like an SA-like profile. Now, this board is also hot swappable. You can put 3 or 5 pin switches inside this board. So I want to see if I can take the switches from the old Leobog keyboard and put them in here and see if they'll function, but I'll test that out for the full review. This board is also tri-connectivity, so it has Bluetooth 2.4 gigahertz and of course USB-C wire connection as well. It does come with a USB-A dongle, but I'll talk about that a little later. Now, EPOMAKER does have a lot of switch options for this board, which is really nice to see. The Leobog's ones were just 2 switches and they were both linear switches, which was fine, but it would have been nice to see some more variety. On the EPOMAKER board here, there is a lot more options. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other switch options just because I don't have them to test here. I'm just going to talk about the ones I chose for this board, which was the Wisteria linear switches. I do prefer linear switches for my typing keyboards, and I prefer a little more tactility for my gaming keyboard, so I'm excited to see how these Wisteria switches hold out over testing. All right, now in terms of the unboxing, let's go ahead and get this open. So first thing we see here, of course, we have the board. We have a nice little dust cover, which you can keep on the side, which is nice to see. Now, one thing I really like here is it does tell you the accessories are underneath this piece of cardboard, which is a nice attention to detail. Sometimes boards don't tell you and you have to go digging for something, so it's nice to have this here. It's a really nice attention to detail. So here we have the board itself. We'll put this off to the side. Now, in terms of the extras included, we have an extra set of these little Wisteria switches. So there's 3 extra ones here, which is nice to see included. We also have a extra space bar, which is kind of a unique thing to see included, but considering the one that comes with the stock black purple configuration is full purple, this is nice to see included in case you wanted to go for a full black bottom row design. Now, of course, since this is a hot swap board, of course, we also have a keycap puller in here. Now, this one actually feels pretty good. The one that came with the Leobog board didn't feel that great. It felt kind of weak in terms of the metal, but this one actually feels quite sturdy, which is great to see. So a very nice high quality keycap puller included, which is wonderful to see here. We also have a black paracord cable here with a USB-C end with a USB-A end as well. This actually feels quite nice. It feels like the cable that would kind of come with the mouse, but this one's very rigid, which is fine for a keyboard. Again, this is wireless. You can use it without this if you wanted to, but this actually feels like a very nice quality cable. Again, a little rigid, but that's pretty common for keyboard cables, but it's very nice to see included. And lastly, we also have a full user manual, which is really nice to see included. A lot of times brands will include like a digital manual, so it's nice to see a full physical manual included. All right, well, that's enough for the accessories. Let's go ahead and talk about the board itself next. All right, now first off, let's talk about the board's build quality. Now, this is one area where some other boards haven't felt too well. There'll be a little bit of flex to it, but this board is, holy moly, wow. Okay, you can see how much pressure I'm putting on this. Wow, that is incredible. I cannot believe, wow, this board is very solid. If you put like an insane amount of pressure, there's like a little bit of wobble, but wow, this is a very well built board. Is this plastic? Yeah, this is plastic. Wow, this has to be one of the most rigid boards I've felt in a very long time. That's very impressive. So durability is a 10 out of 10. It feels extremely solid. Now, in terms of the keycaps here, of course, this is a 75 layout. Again, as I mentioned before, these are the more cherry optimized kind of key layouts. They're going to feel more like a cherry keycap. They do feel pretty solid. They do have a nice kind of little bit of granularity to them. I'm not sure if the light's going to catch that, that properly, but the keys do have like a little bit of granularity, so they actually do have a little bit of grip to them, which is nice. Sometimes on more like office typing optimized keyboards, the keycaps don't have like a coating on them, like the Leobog keyboards were really slippery a lot of the time. These ones actually feel very solid, which is nice to see, and it is across all the keycaps on the board. We also of course have this little volume knob up to the top. It does feel pretty good for the inward click, and also has a nice kind of scroll to it. It actually feels very similar to like a very hard scroll wheel, so that's nice to see. And then again, I love the color theme. It is a very nice theme. Again, there is a black and silver option, but it will have a different keycap profile, so keep that in mind. All right, now one other cool feature about the TH80 SE is this keyboard does actually have full backlighting RGB. I'll go ahead and plug this in here with my old cable. Now, as you can see, the RGB isn't very apparent on the board, and I believe that is by design. The place you're going to notice it the most is going to be here on the EPOMAKER logo, which I actually like. Again, I'm not too big of a fan of those like super RGB boards, so I like this more muted approach here. Now, of course, if these were shine through keycaps, I would see a lot more of the RGB, but given that this feels to me more of a work keyboard, I prefer the less fancy implementation of the RGB here. It does feel very nice, very tasteful. I'll go ahead and turn my light off so you can see it a little better. Now, of course, there are a bunch of options for different RGB settings in the software. I will talk about all those options in the full review, of course, but again, a very muted RGB approach, which I do appreciate. But based off first impressions, the top of the board looks really nice. I love the aesthetics of it, and again, the build quality is extremely solid in this board, which is wonderful to see. Keycaps feel great. All of it just feels very solid. Let's go ahead and flip the board over. Now, on the bottom here, there is a couple things that stand out right away. First off, we have a switch here that toggles between the wireless, USB, and Bluetooth usage, which is nice to see. There is also a switch for toggling between Mac and Windows. I really like to see this on the bottom, just because a lot of other times you want to switch between Mac and Windows layouts, you have to do like a special key combination to do it. This is just a switch, which is nice to see. We also have a USB-A dongle up here, which is very tricky to get out. Okay, honestly, this is actually a good thing. I like it when the dongles are difficult to get out, because if they're really easy to get out, there's a chance they're going to fall out. I actually would rather this be hard to take out than just fall out easily, but we do have a little 2.4 gigahertz dongle there. Now, one thing I'm very happy to see here is that there is different options for the ergonomics of this board. And then on the bottom, we also have full rubber pads for keeping the unit stable. I'm just going to test to see how those work. And the pads feel good. Definitely, if you put a lot of pressure on it, you can, of course, move them from side to side, but they do feel pretty good overall. All right, but overall, the TH80 SE feels very solid. I think my highlight feature of this board so far is the build quality, because it feels just extremely rigid, which is really nice to see. Alrighty, now, of course, since this is the keyboard, what really matters is the typing experience. So let's talk about that next. Now, before we talk about how the switches feel, I'm going to give you a quick little sound test here. Now, the keys to me feel very thonky. They have a very nice, like, kind of tactile thonkiness to them. They are a little bit on the heavier side for a switch, but they do feel pretty solid. They feel kind of similar to what the Leobog switches were. If you added a little bit more weight to them, it had a little bit more thonkiness. Now, of course, there is a lot of foam on the inside of this board to add to the kind of acoustics of this board, but I will talk about that more in the full review. But I really do like the feeling of these Wisteria switches. I just really like the creamy thonkiness of them. In my opinion, I do like the feeling of this board over the Leobog keyboard. The Leobog keyboard was a similar creamy thonkiness, but I prefer the acoustics of this board. I'm not really sure why. I'll see if I can figure that out for the full review, but I really do like the feeling of the TH80 overall. It feels like a very solid board. But that's pretty much everything from my first impressions of the EPOMAKER TH80 SE with these Wisteria linear switches. Overall, a very nice feeling board with some really solid build quality. I'm very excited to see how the board holds up over testing, and I'm very excited to have this replace my old HyperX Ally Origins Core, which is my current like work editing keyboard, and I'm very excited to finally have a newer keyboard I can test. As I mentioned at the top of my video, I will have a much more in-depth dive on the TH80 SE out in a couple weeks, so once I have time to do some more testing, I'll talk more about the switches, the hot swap ability, the ergonomics, and the overall feel of this board, the software, what it feels good for, what it feels bad for. I will talk about all that in a future video, so if you want to see some more in-depth thoughts about this board, be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss that video. But that is everything for today. Thank you very much again to EPOMAKER for sending us over for review. I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next episode of the mel0n review. Peace.